Hi, I'm Paul McLean. I'm a fine arts specialist with the Georgia Department of Education, and this webinar is titled Booking the Gig. It's an introduction to audition, slating, resumes, what to wear, and self-taping. So there are two standards associated directly with auditioning in the Georgia Standards of Excellence, and both are in high school. The first is in Acting 1, the other is in the Acting and Performance for Film course. Now, both are located under the Connecting standard, and the language is virtually the same. For the acting class, we've got Explore How Theater Connects to Life Experiences, Careers, and Other Content, and then the elements beneath that, examine multiple facets of the business of theater, examine the methods of pursuing various acting careers, including demonstrating audition etiquette and techniques. For the Acting and Production and Film course, it's exactly the same, except the terms theater and film have been switched out. Auditioning can be used as a great tool for introducing concepts of performance and assessing performance success in classes such as Fundamentals of Theater, Advanced Drama, Musical Theater. Basically, any performance class can benefit from using auditions, which is why we want to go over this today in the webinar. Also, auditions are a necessary way for performance-oriented students to take steps beyond high school, either going into college or conservatories or directly into career roles. So auditions can be a good tool for addressing multiple standards associated with performance and acting methods in general. Auditions also function directly with the workforce development skills. These include demonstrating employability skills required by businesses and industry, demonstrating creativity, exhibiting critical thinking and problem-solving skills, modeling work readiness traits that are required for success in the workplace, applying appropriate skill sets to be productive in a challenging, technological, and diverse workplace, and presenting a professional image. Students may encounter auditioning in multiple areas, and each of these audition types will require a different approach than the next. And this is not an exhaustive list, but here are a few that are common. You might find students auditioning for a role at the school. You might find students auditioning for a class level, such as moving from Acting 1 to Acting 2, Advanced Drama 1 to 2, and so on. Students might be auditioning for a role in community theater. They could audition for a film. They could audition for a college or conservatory. They could audition for a group of theaters, such as a cattle call, or they may be auditioning for a talent agency. Choosing material. One of the things that students have a lot of trouble with is finding material, primarily because they haven't been exposed to a tremendous amount of material. Now, we can help this a little bit in our coursework when we're actually introducing students to the process of looking for material, how to go through and find monologues that best suit them. And just continually requiring students to read plays or read screenplays is another way to make sure that students have a wide variety of options to choose from. So when students are looking for material, there are different parameters that are set up for the different types of audition. So for example, if a student is auditioning for a particular role, they're going to want to find material that is close to that role. In some cases, the audition might require them to actually read from that particular role, but that is rare. Typically, what the production is going to ask for is roles that are similar to the text that's going to be performed, but not necessarily the exact text. A good way to do this is to find text that is of the similar genre, characters that are similar, that have a similar plight. That is really the best way to go about that for auditioning for a particular role. If you are auditioning for a range of roles in a particular play, then just finding similar texts that fit that genre is probably the best way to go. Another common audition is for getting into a particular program like a college or an institution or a conservatory. This requires the students to do research not only on a particular play or what they do well, but also on the mission statement of that university or that conservatory. You want to make sure as a student that you know what that conservatory puts out on the regular, so you would know what their season is, has been, what their mission statement is, what their goals are, and you'd want to select material that not only showcases what you do in strength, but also shows how you fit in that conservatory. So if you think about the conservatory or the college as the production, then the research that you're doing and the material you're pulling needs to fit in that world. Another important thing to tell students is that if your strengths or your types of performance don't line up with the type of work that's being done at that college or conservatory, maybe it's not for you. That's actually a great lesson to learn, because then you don't waste money and time fighting to try to get into a program that doesn't suit you, that wouldn't make you happy. Another common type of audition is the open call audition. This would be like a unified audition, or a cattle call, it's frequently called. This is a situation where you would have multiple theaters sitting and watching a series of auditions over a period of multiple days. In this situation, the student would want to make sure that they find material that is often contrasting, but within their range. So you'd want to find material that best suits who you are as a performer, what you do well, what you like to do, and then you'd also want to find something that stretches that just a little, but not beyond the realm of possibility of what you could play. In academic theater, students can get away with bending age and experience levels, but when you're looking at a cattle call, specifically for professional theaters or even community theaters, you want to make sure that you know sort of what your type range is, what you can believably play on stage right now where you are in your career, and find material that best reflects that. For these open call auditions, typically students will be asked for contrasting pieces, and that contrast can either be in tone or style, it could be in genre, it could be in period, the time period in which it was written. Another question that comes up, particularly for cattle calls, when there are musical theater auditions mixed in with non-musical theater auditions, which does sometimes happen in cattle calls, if you have the option to sing for something, the question is, should you sing? If you are a singer and you are pursuing singing on stage as a goal, then absolutely, you must sing. There's no way you will be cast in a singing role as a student if you don't actually do the audition. On the other hand, if you are primarily an actor who does not sing, even if you can sing, if you're at a cattle call situation and your main goal is to get cast but not necessarily in a musical, it's best not to bother with the song. Typically in a cattle call audition, there will be a set amount of time that you have to fill, and if singing is not your passion, it's sort of foolish to spend time worrying about the song. Now, in an academic setting, there are many actors who don't necessarily want to sing. Obviously, it is a good idea to have them understand the process of the singing audition. So in a classroom setting, you might require students who don't necessarily sing to sing in a particular audition setup for that learning experience. But in the professional world and beyond high school, if the student's not interested in actually singing on stage, then by all means use that time to fill it with material that best suits and best reflects the talents and abilities of that particular artist. If you're auditioning for a specific role, it is really important to narrow in and really have material that's specifically ready for that role and that show for that company. Now, beyond that, it's a good idea to have a book of auditions. This should be 5 to 10 audition pieces that are roughly 1 minute to 2 minutes long that you could have ready to go in a 24-hour period of notice. This allows the actor, particularly in unified settings, if they receive a callback, they can walk into the room, they can talk about themselves, and they can also say, what else would you like to hear? Or when someone says, what else do you have? There is a large range of options. I know personally from experience that not simply having just one in your back pocket to do for that second round of auditions, but to have an arsenal of material behind you that reflects who you are and what you do, that is a much better thing to be able to put down in front of people. It opens doors much better than simply having one piece prepared. So having a large body of work, and this could rotate out. You could have multiple things ready to go for different types of auditions. Now, obviously, as a high school student, it's a little hard to necessarily come out with a full range of 10 monologues ready to go, but that is the point, that we're trying to build up that knowledge of material so you have stuff that fits you and fits any situation you might run into. Slating. When teaching students about slating, it can be kind of complicated because, well, it varies. The specific way in which to introduce a piece varies from audition type to audition type. It's very different for film than it is for theater in general. It's different for a one-on-one audition where you might be auditioning for a particular role and you have a larger amount of time to interact with the director, casting director, whoever else is in the room. If it's a cattle call, it's usually very, very set, and they will tell you exactly what to say, and you should not deviate from that. Find your light. stand perfectly still, breathe in the audience, get your bearings, say your name, the piece that you're doing, and then go into the monologue or song or whatever your setup is. And then at the end of the piece, you can either say thank you or your name again or whatever they tell you to do. You don't want to vary from that because part of this audition process is indicating that you can follow instructions. It is, in fact, a business interview as well as a demonstration of what you're able to do. No matter what the parameters are, you should be yourself. You want to make sure that you're showing who you are. This is a brief couple of seconds to indicate who you are in that introduction, no matter how brief it is. Another question that comes up for slating is, where do I look? And this also varies. For the slating process, if you were in a room with 1 to 3 people in the slate, you could make direct eye contact, but then it would be very awkward to make direct contact with them if in the actual piece, because that forces the person watching you to be in the scene with you. And it's very hard to adjudicate what's going on and where you fit if the person is trying to be responsive in an acting situation. So typically they will ask you to look past them or to the side. Sometimes, however, they will say, look directly at me. So that is a thing that you can ask, but generally speaking, 1 to 3 people, we're going to not make eye contact. Now, if you are in an intimate setting and you have lots of people, say 15 to 20, then making individual direct eye contact is sometimes very, very useful as long as you vary it throughout the room in the course of what you're doing. However, if you're talking to specific imaginary people in the monologue, you want to pick 3 or however many focal points that you have in the piece and continue to hit those, which will typically be just above and to the back of your audience base. If you have more than 30 people, or if it's in like a setting where it's a proscenium stage and you can't really see the audience, it's sort of useless to actually try to make eye contact. So then you just want to make sure that you've got your focal points, that you keep coming back to those. Focal points do need to be out in the stage. It's a very bad idea, and this is something that comes up sometimes with high school students. You don't want to put the focal point to your side. So if you're talking to somebody in a chair, there's no point to put an actual chair to your side and turn profile, because then, of course, they can't see any of the work that you're doing. So you want to move those focal points out and up so that any impulse for the actor to bring it down is then cheated by pulling it up so that everyone can see exactly what you're doing and all the nuanced work. Sometimes, before or after the audition proper, the director or casting people will ask you to talk about yourself a little bit. If you don't know that this is going to happen, this can be a little unsettling. So it's a good idea to have 10, 15 minutes worth of material to talk about yourself, your goals, what you like to do. It's not a bad idea to have a joke, even. This is another opportunity for them to get to know who you are, if it's the type of audition where they have time to actually walk through and spend time with each individual coming into the room. This is typically not going to happen at a cattle call, but if you get a callback from that cattle call from a particular institution or company, they may want to have a more one-on-one conversation with you. Very commonly in self-taped auditions for film, they will ask, if it's for an institution or particularly for a talent agency, for you to talk a little bit about who you are, what your goals are, what your likes are. However, if it's not asked for, you probably shouldn't include it. Another common question for students auditioning is what to wear. And again, it varies. And this one varies with time, not just institution or what you're auditioning for. It changes, much like the resumes change and the headshots change. So this is something that you should sort of see what other people are wearing, talk to people who are currently auditioning, and figure out what works best. In the classroom, obviously, you can set your own parameters. And generally speaking, the rule is you want to dress professionally enough to indicate that you are a functioning, capable person who would be great to work with on this project or in this institution, but also shows your personality and who you are. Now, that being said, there are some audition scenarios, or particularly for competitions, such as the individual events with Georgia Thespians, that they require you to wear all black. So really, you just want to make sure that you understand if there are rules, that you're following those rules exactly before you walk into the audition space. But if there are no rules, you want to make sure that your clothing fits your personality, but also indicates that you have a level of professionalism and understand that body and dress tell stories. And so you want to make sure you're communicating exactly what you wish to communicate to the people you're auditioning for. It's a little bit different with film and theater. In theater, you would never ever dress as the character or in costume necessarily. You might nod towards the costume or character feelings or emotions or personality, but you would never dress as the character. There are some film auditions that will not require but ask you to dress the character. They will want to know how close you can get to landing that character without them having to do very much work. So you can see film auditions where people will be dressed as the character. This is not always the case. Sometimes you just want to dress relatively professionally with a nod towards the character you're playing without actually being in some sort of full costume. Although for self-tape, you do want to make sure that you avoid tightly knit patterns. You want to make sure that there's nothing that's going to be distracting on the screen. So solid colors tend to be useful, or if not solid colors, at least large blocks so that the video does not get wonky with the individual little detailed designs. Resumes and headshots. This varies constantly. What is in vogue for resumes and headshots now will change tomorrow. So it's great to go online, figure out what other working actors are doing, look at what talent agencies are asking for. Generally speaking, you're going to want your basic information at the top. It's very common right now to have a small picture, like a miniature headshot on the side of the resume for people to look at and be able to sort with ease. You will have basic information and a means to contact you that does not tell people where you live. The resumes can go out into anyone's hands, so like with all things that involve identity theft or even with the possibility of people finding you, you want to make sure that that contact information is something simple, like an email address that you have dedicated to receiving information about potential work. Typically in that information about who you are, it's a name, maybe your hair color, your eyes, your height and weight generally. You don't typically want to put on age because it's all about what you can play, and that can be left up to the casting director. Below that, you would typically want to have the areas of performance. So if this is a multi-tiered resume where you include theater and film and voiceover, you would have a section for theater, film, voiceover. Typically, though, for most students, they're not going to have as much material. If they happen to have that kind of material, they can break it into those categories. If all they've got is theater for right now, then it's going to be the theater category. Basically, it would be the name of the show, the role, and then what company you worked with. If this fills a full page, great. If it doesn't, theater students can put in specific training and special skills. If it's training in particular styles, such as Lessig or Laban, you maybe want to include that. Another thing that students might need to be told after a bit is that everything doesn't have to go on your resume. In fact, you can have multiple resumes. If you audition for classical theater, you have one resume that really plays up all of the classical theater you've done and doesn't include some of the non-classical work. If you're auditioning for something that does not involve classical theater at all, you probably don't want to include all your Shakespeare titles. So you can tailor your resume to whatever fits the particular need. I think this is a really good idea to keep this digital. You can have hard copies. Hard copies are required frequently at audition sites, but more and more people are happy to go to that digital. And even on the hard copies, having a URL that you can go to so for more information about your work is a great way to go. Resumes are becoming less and less important. Online content is becoming more and more important. This includes actually social media. Frequently, actors, this is more common in film than it is in theater, but it's also true in theater. If you have a social media account, they'll want to know because being able to promote yourself is just as important sometimes, depending on what company you're working with, as the work itself. With headshots, these are your calling card. It's absolutely necessary to have a headshot that looks like you. And you might want a range of yous because maybe you play multiple types and multiple characters and want to have that availability, and that's great. But headshots are super expensive. So I typically advise students in high school not to get more headshots than they know they're going to use in a year. You can always reorder. If you have a tremendous amount of headshots and you buy them in bulk, with a teenager, they're going to look different the next year. And anyone younger than a teenager doing work is obviously going to look very, very different. So it's sort of a waste of money to dump tremendous amounts of time and energy and funds into getting headshots for children who are going to be changing very rapidly over the next 365 days. Self-taping. it's not just the pandemic. This has been huge for a while now. And it's an area that prior to the pandemic was not being really taught in a lot of schools. So, what we're going to do now is actually turn over to a presentation on best ways to do self-taping.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to February webinar topic number 2. I'm Lillian Gina Quiñones, and I'm your high school theater PLC leader. I'm going to give you 4 categories of tips. They're not going to be exhaustive because I don't have a ton of time, but I will have some accompanying documents and PowerPoints in the resources that I share along with this on the GaDOE platform. So make sure you click on that and open and browse through all of that. So I'm going to talk about devices and materials, self-taping techniques, managing submissions, and editing and streaming. The most important thing to know, and hopefully this gives you a deep breath, is you can work with what students have. We do not have to have fancy equipment to create really beautiful shows. iPhones are magical. They have so many capabilities. They're endless. If your student doesn't have an iPhone, no problem. I myself am a Samsung girl, and I get some really high quality videos from my Samsung. They can use iPads, they can use their laptop. There are a lot of ways around it where you can use what students have. You also want to consider supplemental materials. So if, for example, 2 things. You can either have these in your classroom for lending out like a little supplemental material library, or in our case, we were virtual, so we lent them out to students. We kind of had them drive up. We deliver them like instruments, right? If a student plays a saxophone, they came around and got their saxophone or their violin or their art supplies. These were the supplies that we let our students borrow for their classes last semester and this semester. Mini ring light or a regular 10-inch ring light, backdrops, and tripods. You can either do like a nice gray or dusty blue backdrop, just that you have a standard color, or you can do green screen backdrops. And they do not have to be fancy. A really lovely workaround for a green screen is a vinyl tablecloth. A green vinyl tablecloth from Party City or the dollar store works really great as a green screen, and then you can use all kinds of really fun virtual backgrounds in your virtual productions. So as long as they have something to record with, you're okay. And then optionally, if you have these supplemental materials, it can help kind of elevate the quality of their videos so that you're able to edit and play around with virtual backgrounds if you'd like. So you've crossed the first thing off of your list. Your students have something to record on, or you have something to record on. Potentially, you might be recording them yourself or have a student recording them at school. You have something to record on, you have a tripod to steady the camera, and you have some supplemental optional materials. But now what? How do you make it look good? I have provided this self-tape guide. The link is right here in the presentation, but it'll also be included in that document I was telling you about. The first thing students must know is that the aspect ratio, which is this kind of size of the frame, doesn't happen automatically. They have to set it. So you want to make sure that your students go into their camera and set their aspect ratio to widescreen, which is also 16:9 if it's horizontal, 16:9. If it's a vertical, it'll say 9:16. You want it to be 16:9. And that their resolution is also set to HD. You can do that very easily by going to your camera settings in your phone. It'll give you options, and the option that you're looking for is the 4K option. It'll say, the newer phones say 4K / 30 FPS. F as in Frank, P as in piano, S as in Sam. 4K and 30 FPS, and that's your HD setting. A lot of phones don't record in that automatically because it does use up a lot of storage. So there are tutorials on YouTube you can find that'll help you. Really, really simple solution to getting a really nice high quality video from a phone. Then in the self-tape guide that I've provided for you, you're going to find some information on framing, shots, angles, lighting, backgrounds, and audio. Audio is really important, and it can be really, really tricky with self-taping. I'm going to browse through it really quickly. I'm not going to go through the whole presentation, but just to kind of show you what types of things you're going to find inside the guide. All right, so self-tape guide, 10 essential tips for high quality videos. You're going to find in here some information about how to frame, always horizontal, never vertical, unless you want to use vertical for some specific thing, some specific artsy reason. I always have them frame horizontally. I teach them about the rule of thirds, where their body should be within the frame, how to use the grid lines on their phone to either center themselves or place their face within one of the intersections of the grids, and headroom. We don't want to waste a lot of space on camera, right? We don't want to waste a lot of space in the frame. So we talk to them about headroom. Then some basic shots. Medium shot for your basic self-tape, close-up shot, or even closer than that sometimes, but your close-up shot for moments that we want it to be a more intimate acting moment. Also talk to them about your full shot for dance submissions and how to shoot outdoors. So kind of talk to them in depth about not just your full shot, but also depth and how to compose your frame, or how to put a person in a frame where there's a world behind them, right? And this is where some of the cinematic techniques come in, because when you have a world behind you as opposed to just a flat wall, it creates more of a 3D effect, and it's just more aesthetically pleasing. So those are some of the things we talk about in shots. Then angles. The big thing here is eye level, eye level, eye level, right? Low angles, no bueno. I say no, no, no to the low angle, especially for dancers. If you're doing a musical theater piece, sometimes they'll want to put their phone on the floor. I really discourage that. Find a way to get that full shot as close to eye level as possible. And whenever you're singing or acting, or we're doing a show that requires a virtual background, when that eye line is going straight to the camera, it's going to make a difference. Or if you're self-taping a scene where your eye line is slightly off the camera, where your typical self-tape, even so, you don't want that low angle to be down there. Then lighting. We talk a lot about lighting. And the most important thing is to keep your face out of the shadows. We want to see your beautiful faces, children. So giving them some tips as to how to make that happen with or without the fancy equipment, right? If they don't have a ring light, which a lot of our students don't, and a lot of us don't have that to give to them, how can we create that for ourselves? Lamps, or using natural light standing in front of the window, not having a window behind you, things like that. And then working with outdoor lighting. And you'll see from my show sample that I show you later, is we ended up doing several of our things outdoors. And sometimes that's tricky because for some reason, children want to find all the shadows. So as explicit as we can be, the better, right? Then sound, how to make sure that you avoid echoes and white noise and watching your distance from the camera. We also talk about backgrounds, how to use your backdrop appropriately, and how to make sure your space is clean, or if you're in an outdoor scene, following specific directions of your director. That is a little preview of the self-tape guide. All right, let's go back to the main presentation here. Now, how do I get what I want? All right, we've done the self-tape guide. They've practiced. They're doing really good with their practice submissions. And now I need to make sure that we have a cohesive look for our show. I've provided some sample filming instructions here for you. I've divided it into shots, location and lighting, costume and makeup. Give explicit and detailed instructions as much as you can, and spend time going through the instructions for each number. So let's say you're doing a 1-hour show, you have 8 musical numbers and 3 scenes. Each one of them is going to require its own set of instructions. So once you rehearse that, my recommendation is to make sure that you carve out time to give the specific instructions for that number, and then have them focus on recording that number. Because you might want several different things so that you can edit together something that's really fun and engaging. So I had them submit 4 different things for this one number: an indoor scene, an outdoor scene, and 2 B-rolls, so that we can have a lot to choose from. File sharing. How are you going to get video files from them to you? Most of our homework submission platforms that we have, they have the option, aside from documents, they have the option for students to transfer files directly through there. Sometimes, however, depending on what platform you're using, it might lower the quality of the video. If you find that that's the case, a really great solution to that, which is free, is called WeTransfer. And it's just WeTransfer.com. You can go to that website, have students go to the website, they upload their work, and it comes directly to your email, and you can download the file in its original format straight to your laptop. So that's a good way to do it. It can get a little bit overwhelming if you have a large group that's doing it. So just kind of a warning on that side. With submissions, make sure you plan ahead for reshoots. And give the kids a heads up. I might not accept your first video that you submit to me, and that's okay, because we're all on a learning journey. We're all on this learning curve together. So you might submit to me a video where half your face is in the dark, and we're going to do it again. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Hopefully someday I'll get to meet you in person. In the meantime, join us on the GaDOE Fine Arts PLC and invite your teacher friends. If you want to connect, chat more about the ideas or resources I shared today, feel free to email me at liliangina.quino@apsk12.org.
So speaking of auditioning for colleges, there are lots of options, and it is very expensive to audition for them. The key important thing for students to understand here is it's quality, not quantity. There's really no reason to go out and audition for 15 to 20 to 30 colleges or institutions. Going to a cattle call audition like a Unified's, that's fine if everyone is watching you at once, but if it's a situation where you just show up at the hotel and then you're individually going to all these schools, that also can get very expensive and very time-consuming. The truth is, there's rarely a situation where 15 to 20 colleges actually fit the needs of the individual artist. It's important for the artist to take time for that student to know who they are, what they want, what kind of environment they want to be in, and where they feel comfortable learning and growing. There are a huge number of schools with excellent, strong programs that just aren't going to fit you, that just aren't things that you really are going to thrive in. And having an honest conversation about who you are and where you are and what you want is really the only way to find the school that's best for you. It's a terrible idea to audition for schools solely because of their reputation. This is for two reasons. One, a reputation is typically about 10 years old by the time you've heard of it. It's important to talk to people who are currently in the institution now so that you understand what that's like. And two, the reputation of a school does not always represent the experience of the individuals who are in the school. So that's usually the way outside people are looking in and seeing the quality of work, and that's fine. That can provide you with information, but it doesn't tell the whole story. So if you're going to spend 3 to 4 years working intently with this organization and spending lots of money, oftentimes even with scholarships if you're lucky enough to get them, you want to make sure that it really is serving you. They technically work for you. They are training you. Now, you get out of a program what you put into it. Unifieds might work really well for some, but a targeted, well-researched set of 3 to 5 schools is more commonly the route to finding an institution that best fits a student's needs. Tips from Georgia actors to students. We interviewed 75 working Georgia-based actors who are between the ages of 20 to 40 and asked them what were the top tips they had for auditioning and what did they wish they knew as a high school student going into the market. And these are their responses. Learning from a choice that fails is better than doing nothing. At least you did something discussable. Read as much material as possible when looking for audition material. There are great collections such as the Humana collections, the Kilroy list. They're a fantastic place to start. And avoid audition monologue books for actors. Now, caveat, those books can be really useful in the classroom, but they don't introduce students to the larger body of work or the arc of storytelling the way that a play would or a monologue within a play. A good way for colleges and institutions to know that the student is actually researching and is well read is to actually work with literature that is functioning and being performed all the time, and not just, I've got this monologue so I can do this audition so I can get this done. Don't be afraid of Shakespeare, but if you're struggling to find classical work that doesn't feel overdone, look away. Turn to Jacobean works. They're much less frequently done, but they still have heightened language with a tremendous amount of content that you can sink your teeth into. This is from another actor in Georgia. The biggest thing that I wish more people had talked about when I was 16 to 17, and the thing that I stress hardest when I do master classes for kids in high school looking to pursue theater in college and beyond, is where you go to school is a lot more than a name and a Facebook post. Too many kids get caught up in big-name schools and wind up at places they hate. Once the dust settles, you actually have to live and train there for years. For 4 years. Sit in on some classes and see if you like the teachers' respective styles. Walk around the campus, but also spend time in the town. How does it make you feel? Could you see yourself living there for 4 years? Learn anything and everything you can and make decisions about if it's the right place for you. Apply the same research you do for colleges and conservatories to auditioning for professional theaters and programs. When you are auditioning for them, you are also auditioning them. Take that power that you have in the room and don't just accept something because it's offered. It will make you feel much more confident and less desperate when you get in front of them, and it may save you from being in an awful situation. Take your training in college as seriously as you can. You will never again have the time and flexibility to take that many classes, and it gets really expensive to take classes after you graduate. Realistically, no professional theater cares at all what shows you did in college. Being on stage is great training in and of itself, but the most important thing you get out of your time in college is the training. Do not take it for granted. You get out of this industry what you put into it. If you get accepted to CCM or Carnegie or whatever and then get lazy because you made it into one of these big schools, you will be completely lapped by people who trained at what you may consider a lesser school. Just going to a certain program does not ensure actually being well trained, and if you don't get into your dream school, you can still come out as well prepared as you want to be. Don't count on your professors to be your only source of teaching. Read plays, check out practice rooms to run material, tape yourself running things and making notes about what isn't reading the way you meant it to. Ask your friends and peers to watch stuff and give notes. Book out the dance studio and go work in there, etc. The harder you work and the more you put into this career, the more you get out of it. Guaranteed. Anyone can book a show, film, project. You stay in this industry long enough, the odds are wildly in your favor to book at least once. What you do with that opportunity of your first show or project, that's what decides if you get a second. Work hard and be pleasant. No one wants to work with a jerk, no matter how talented they are. Hard workers who add something positive to the environment will work more than talented divas every day of the week. Once you reach a certain level, everyone in the room next to you is talented, but only you are you. Don't think about what to do to be the character, but make choices that are individualized. Be yourself. Be comfortable in your own shoes. If you are what they're looking for, you will get it. If you aren't, you won't. It becomes so much easier to accept that this has nothing to do with who is the more talented person, and more to do with what the casting director is looking for specifically. But if you go in there and try to act how you think the casting director wants you to act for this role, A, you may look inauthentic, which may make you seem less honest as an actor. And B, they may have been looking for exactly what you could bring to the role, and you missed it by trying to be someone else. Resources and assessments for auditions. In the TRL, there are a series of exercises that work well with introducing the concept of auditions. So where to start in the classroom? If you're first introducing the concept of auditions to students, you can go to the Georgia Department of Education's website, pull up the instructional resources available for theater and film, and there are multiple audition exercises and lesson plans available for a variety of classes from 6th through 12th grade. We're going to take a look at fundamentals of theater for high school. These exercises could be scaled up or down for any grade level or any particular class. Lesson Plan 5 under Unit 3 for Fundamentals of Theater is Preparing and Auditioning. As with all of the instructional frameworks, this lesson plan comes with lesson title, enduring understanding, technical focus, the list of all of the relevant Georgia standards of excellence, as well as assessment options, foundational information, concepts, vocabulary, additional resources, ways for differentiating learning, essential questions, and detailed steps for the lesson plan. This lesson plan suggests that the teacher model an audition for the students and have the students provide feedback based on what they saw in the teacher model. This is a good way to make sure that the teacher is involved in the same activity as the student, which builds trust as well as providing a specific model for what the students can be aiming for. The slating game in this exercise is one that's particularly effective for making sure that students have control over their bodies. Essentially, students are told they're going to audition for the class. They're going to take lines from a well-known song lyric and present it as though it were an overly serious audition. The students are to present themselves in a focused manner, stating their names and title of the piece they are to perform. The type of company that the student is auditioning for is entirely up to the individual. This means that the piece could be done in the exaggerating style of a Shakespeare monologue, Chekhov, Neil Simon, whatever, as long as it is a specific and distinct choice. The example format for the presentation is as follows. Actor walks to the center of the room, finding their light. Hello, my name is, stating their name. I'll be performing a piece from. The actor takes a moment to compose themselves for their piece and then starts. The students who are observing are to rate each of the auditions. This exercise is a great way for the teacher to stop and start to make sure the students understand how to have control over their bodies. Very frequently, students will not be able to stand still for that basic simple slating and then going into the monologue. There's a lot of movement that has to be controlled and understood and learned, really, in order to make sure the students have control over it. So this is really a great exercise that solely is focused on the slating purpose and not so much on the actual acting portion of the monologue. From here, having the students understand that they're going to perform a full audition with a monologue, the next steps are to go and select material, read things, find things that best suit their needs. This could be expanded up or down by having contrasting pieces, or this could even include a song, and then over the next couple of weeks, actually work with the material in the classroom with small groups, providing feedback using that Liz Lerman style of critical response. If you're interested in the critical response, we have a full Critiquing with Kindness webinar that goes into extreme detail how you can use the Liz Lerman feedback for works in progress that is incredibly effective here in this learning about your material. What's really important in these stages is the students are taking notes on the feedback they get from their peers as well as the feedback they get from their instructor. And at the end, a full cattle call audition is held with the entire class. There are also assessments and peer critique assessments in this instructional framework setup. So for the peer critique that students are giving their peers when they are working on the monologues, this 8-point questionnaire can be used to take notes on giving feedback to the peer who is presenting the audition one at a time. And then last but not least, there is a summative performance assessment that can be used for the audition. This can be seen as a formative or summative, but it's ranking from 1 to 4 for slating and transitions, characterization, voice, movement, and execution. If you enjoyed that presentation by our PLC high school lead, by all means, please join our communities. And that is our presentation on auditions. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, join the community, drop us a line in there, or email me directly, and we'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much.
For additional questions, please contact the Fine Arts team. Jessica Booth, Paul McLean, Casey Hall.